everybody, your friendly neighborhood Glenn here, coming at you from the No Vacancy Studios out here in Smithtown, Long Island. And how excited you guys are for another episode of our LinkedIn Live show. And I got to tell you, after doing the first two episodes, man, oh man, am I having a great time doing this. I'm really excited today to be able to do it yet again with all of you out there. But today we're going to be doing this a little bit differently. Today we're going to focus on something serious, a really important issue that affects all of us here in the hospitality industry. And I'm talking about the trouble of addiction. It's a real concern. It's a real issue. And believe it or not, the numbers in the hospitality industry are 2 times the amount of folks outside the hospitality industry. I know you've all been there before. You're out, you're partying and stuff like that. It's all a good time, but then suddenly it may no longer be a good time. And that's why we're going to talk about that today. And we're also going to honor this year's hospitality hero, Mr. Mark Woodworth. And while we're waiting for Mr. Gary Mendell, the head of Shatterproof, I think we should bring in Mark right now. So let's bring him on in. Hey, Mark, how you doing, man?
Hey, Glenn, boy, this makes my day because, we don't get to see each other that often, but yet here it is, 2 weeks in a row, we're together.
I know. This is super exciting, Mark. And I got to tell you, last week, Mark and I had the distinct honor of being on the stage at Red Line Hotel Corporation's annual conference. And it was a lot of fun to finally get to work with you on stage again. It's been too long there, Mark.
Well, again, Glenn, thanks for the opportunity. And Shatterproof is something that's very important to us and our family, and as you mentioned, to the industry. Just promise me you won't ask me hard questions today like you did last week in Las Vegas.
I promise that today will all be softballs coming right at you because it is the holiday season, and I don't want to stress you out, Mr. Woodworth. That would be just too much.
By the way, Glenn, I'm
prepared
to do this to you if you ask me the wrong thing.
Yes.
There you go.
So that's great. All right. So where are we now? We're still waiting on Gary to arrive here. But let's talk a little bit about the Shatterproof organization. Mark, maybe you could kick it off about why you feel. Oh, wait, I'm going to stop that. And here he is, Mr. Gary Mendell. How are you, sir? It is great for you to join us on our live broadcast today.
Thank you, John, and Mark. Nice to see you as well.
Yeah, Sir Gary. Yeah. Likewise.
Yeah. So it's great to have you here, Gary. And I think the best place for us to start, Gary, before we get into all of this, is maybe share with us what Shatterproof is and why it's so important for people to come involved to help fight the scourge of addiction that's affecting our society.
Sure. Well, some people may know that are listening and watching. Mm-hmm. My career was in the hotel business. And my older son, Brian, was struggling with addiction for many years. And tragically, we lost him in October 2011. Excuse me. But what came out of that was, like I suspect, I did like I suspect many people would do, is really trying to reflect in the tragedy of what happened. How could this happen? So many of us in the business world are successful at what we're doing, and we're problem solvers. And I wasn't able to solve this. And looking at it, I started to uncover things that I didn't know when my son was alive. And I had no idea how big this was. 25 million people in this country addicted to drugs and alcohol. I had no idea, which when you run the math on that, that's 1 in 10 above the age of 12. It's one fifth of American families.
Right.
It's the 3rd largest cause of death behind heart and cancer. It's really pervasive and big. And what also struck me was that I learned that 8 out of 10 of those addicted today became addicted before their 18th birthday. It's it's our teenagers. Mostly, not 100%. And then what really struck me the hardest, and it was like my son had died all over again, was when I learned that our National Institutes of Health had provided grants of tens of billions of dollars a year to researchers all over the country in the couple decades before my son died. And those researchers had successfully created a body of knowledge that had proven without any doubt to be able to significantly reduce the number of our loved ones who ever become addicted.
Right.
Another body of knowledge, Glenn, that had proven without any doubt to improve outcomes in treatment.
Right.
Yet all this information was sitting in medical journals. Hardly any of it was being used. I mean, it was just, as a father, I was destroyed.
Right.
But that as a businessman, the key point here is, as a businessman, like any of us would look at, is you had information today that can start saving lives tomorrow. Let's get it used.
So before I bring it up, Mark, to have him add some stuff to this conversation, Gary, I have to ask you, why do you think the American society chose to ignore such a serious issue for so long? Now, because of the good work of people like you and your organization and other folks out there, it's really come into the conversation now on an almost day-to-day basis. But what was holding it back? Why do you think finally you were able to help make that dam break?
Many things, but the biggest one by far is shame and stigma.
Right.
Because of stigma, this has been, the treatment of this disease has been not looked at it as a disease.
Right.
It's been segregated outside of our healthcare system,
right,
into a treatment industry that's been unregulated and not fully educated to what the current science shows.
Mm-hmm.
You know, John, excuse me, I keep saying John Glenn, sorry.
But I would say John Glenn, great senator, great astronaut. So hey, I'm on
it. Glenn, we read stories about the unscrupulous treatment providers out there, but any industry has a bottom, right? That's not the issue here. It's not the bottom 2 or 3%. It's the 98% or 95% that are really good people running these treatment programs, where the science hasn't caught up with the industry.
Right.
And a lot of it is because it's outside the healthcare system. And there's been all this judgment, like it's not taught in medical schools. Every medical school, every medical school in the country gives some basic information on asthma, diabetes, heart disease. Very few give any education at all on addiction. Why? Stigma. Why should we have it in our medical school? It's not a disease.
Right. Yeah, and I also think, Gary, that a lot of it has to do with, you're right, where you're touching on, it's not a disease. No, it's because you as an individual aren't strong enough. It's something wrong with you, as opposed to being a circumstance that you don't have control over. So I agree that we've definitely demonized it in that way. But I got to take this over to Mark. Mark, I feel like you've been sitting here kind of like one of those panels you're on where you have to listen to everyone else talk and look like you're really excited about their data. I want to hear from you, Mark. How did you get involved with Shatterproof? What was the moment for you that you realized that you needed to help try to put an end to this scourge?
Well, Glenn and Gary, again, it's true. It's always great to be with you and so forth. It really wasn't until Gary got involved and brought light and shed light on the magnitude of the issue that, quite frankly, I had any remote awareness of just how big a concern this is for all of us. And as you mentioned, Glenn, in your introductory remarks, you can multiply that by something with respect to the hospitality industry,
right?
Which is where I've been fortunate, and as Gary, just literally all of our careers have spent our time in this industry. So we're fortunate, and Gary and I have talked about this before, but we have not had to deal with it in our immediate family. But having said that, relatives, cousins, friends, co-workers, again, as I became more and more aware, I better understood the magnitude of the problem. So and Gary, I know you feel the same way in the sense that, there's only so many hours in the day. And it seems like as we get older, those hours seem to go by more quickly. So you're always wondering, what's the best use of my time? What can I do to help make a difference, and so forth. And so as the more I thought about it, and frankly just had the opportunity to get involved. And again, Gary, thank you for providing that. I just said, this really is something that I and our family need to focus on. At the same time, because there is only so much time of the day, you want to make sure that you're partnering with somebody who's going to get the job done, who's going to be effective, who's going to make a difference. And Gary, I'm not saying this just to make you feel good, but you have those qualities. So it's been an interesting and informative run for me the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years now, Gare, and whether it's jumping off the side of a building. By the way, I still say jump. I can't help but use that instead of rappel. Through the runs, and then of course the Alice event, which again, Gary, thank you and your colleagues for flattering me and giving me that opportunity, because it's a very important and good event.
And Mark is, of course, talking about him being named the Hospitality Hero for this year's benefit that's taking place at Alice on January 28th from 6:15 to 7:30. We'll be honoring Mark Woodworth at that event, and we really want to see that all of you to come out. Last year, the honor to attend the event, and boy, was that room packed, and you could see the difference that you folks out there are making. And I do want to talk a little bit more about that. Before we get into that event, I want to open it up to you folks out there. If you have any questions about the perils of addiction, if you have a loved one that might need a little bit help and you don't know what to do, or maybe you yourself are struggling with the problem, Gary can help you, Shatterproof can help you. We might be able to offer you up some great advice here, because this is the holiday season, and right now it's harder than ever to stay away from all of those demons, particularly us in the hospitality industry, where a lot of our culture is based on going out and having drinks. It's based on partying. It's based on staying out way too late and doing things that you're probably going to be embarrassed about the next day. So we all have to kind of rally together and help each other. And the one thing that I would say, Gary, is I've noticed that there seems to be a lot of shaming out there in the business. I've gotten older. I like to go to sleep a little bit earlier, but every single time I try to remove myself from a situation where there might be substances involved and I don't feel like participating, I still kind of feel like that kid on the playground getting a lot of that peer pressure, and folks just won't let me go. And sometimes I find it very difficult to say, no, I'm not going to have that one more round, and I'm just going to leave. What advice would you give folks that need to extract themselves from those situations, but still need to get work done? And I ask that because I have some friends that have addiction issues and feel that they have to remove themselves entirely from the situation. And that's really hard if you really want to kind of continue to be with everyone and do business in our industry. So Gary, how do you negotiate something like that?
Well, I would say that the first thing is that corporate America should, one by one, and hopefully a wave of organizations, will create policies within their companies just that provide for both, right? There should, at every corporate gathering, where there's a bar, there should be a bar next to it with non-alcoholic drinks.
Yes, right.
Think about what we did for disabilities. The laws were passed, and every building in this country is now built with a ramp for a wheelchair.
Right.
Well, why isn't there that so-called ramp, if you will, where every environment that people are in, there's the opportunity to have non-alcoholic drinks, and it's just accepted.
Right.
And it almost seems like a no-brainer. Like, why aren't we doing this? Kind of like, exactly what I just said with ramps for wheelchairs.
Right.
You can't imagine a building being built without it now. It's like, what were they thinking?
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing now for having that type of environment. And the same thing for socially outside of companies.
Right.
Companies are the ones that leading things. If we think about the changes in smoking,
right? Mm-hmm.
Joe Califano, who was HHS secretary, that took the lead decades ago, that said, I am going to start with government buildings. There will be no smoking in government buildings. And he took the first leap to do that. And then it started to spread across all of America, where people were not smoking in buildings.
That's right.
And it takes some leading organizations to go do that. And that could be hotel companies, right? We're in the hospitality business. Why not offer that to every company who's doing the setting?
Right.
And just offering it, many companies will take advantage of it.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And, you think about the trends that we have in hospitality, and we speak all the time about how wellness, for example, is taking off as a major trend out there. So it makes me think, why aren't we practicing the stuff that we're out there preaching? Maybe, Mark, you could add a little something to this, because you're the data guy. You know how things are happening out there. How do you see it?
Well, when it comes to our forecast, I just always call Gary up and say, Gary, what should the numbers be next year? And I spread the word, something like that. But, Well, I think the answer is what Gary, you all were just talking about. I mean, it's the awareness factor, and I can't tell you how many times, Glenn and Gary, that have been in a situation where people have become aware that Shatterproof is important to me, that have come up and just voluntarily said, "Geez, I've got an issue, and can you point me in a direction where I can get some help and so forth."
Right.
So it's the awareness, which again Shatterproof is doing, and this broadcast here is another great example. I mean, just as many vehicles and channels that we can get out to and make people aware that not only the magnitude of the issue, but more critically, what some of the things that can be done to address the issue and obviously address it successfully. Like, for example, Gary, I think anybody watching is going to quickly see we haven't really scripted this, but I was curious if Gary, spend a minute on the Just 5 program.
Sure.
I think it's a terrific idea. It's something that doesn't take a big commitment to begin to understand, what can be done to help somebody. So Gareth, maybe take a minute and talk about that. I think the listeners would find that to be.
Yeah, please do, Gary.
Sure. There's so much information that families should want to know about this disease that they don't know, both preventatively when you're raising children or when you're in the thick of having an issue.
Right.
And in today's society, because of social media and the way we've all evolved, attention spans are really, really short. So we determined that there were 6 key lessons of information that people really need to know. And we spent a year curating the millions of pieces of information out there that exist on these 6 topics, and curating it down to 5 minutes a lesson. And we call it Just 5 for that reason. It's 5 minutes. And that's 6 lessons towards 5 minutes, which is 30 minutes. But if we put out to companies information to give their employees 30 minutes, even 30 minutes is way too long.
Right.
So we created the software that we allow companies to pick a cadence. Do you want 5 minutes a month? You want 1 lesson a month for 6 months? Do you want 1 lesson a week for 6 weeks? Do you want 1 lesson every 2 weeks for 12 weeks? And let the company pick the cadence. So so there's an email or there's a distribution of that content 6 times. And every time you get it, it's only 5 minutes. And it's for the entire population of companies to start, although we're going to start giving it out to communities and PTAs, et cetera. But for right now, it's companies. We just launched it with JP Morgan Chase, all 250,000 employees 6 weeks ago.
Wow.
And in the next 2 weeks, it's launching. Yeah, the next 2 weeks, it's launching with Optum Health. It's launching with Highmark Health. It's launching with GE, with the Hartford, the casualty insurer. 15 small businesses are launching it in the month of January. We haven't even marketing it yet. It's just getting out. And it's a way to very simply, with just 5 minutes of information of the things that everyone needs to know. There's a lesson on prevention of what you need to know. There's a lesson on specific to opioids. There's a lesson on how do you deal with a family member who may be struggling.
Excellent.
There's a lesson on recovery. And this is, literally this week, there were 10 more companies. I can't even list the names. I haven't seen the list yet. We're signing up today right now that want to use this program to get it out to their employees.
Right. I think that's a super valuable idea. And if you do want to participate in this type of program, I'm sure if you just go to shatterproof.org, they can help you. And I'll continue to mention shatterproof.org as we go through this, since this is a live broadcast. But Gary, I know you're there to help people create these programs and to help demystify all of this stuff that goes around it. I give you kudos on this particular program. Mark, how do you see the issue of addiction in the hospitality industry these days, and what can we all kind of do about it if we see a friend, a colleague, even a loved one struggling with these sorts of things?
Well, I guess a couple things, Glenn, that immediately come to mind is, it's been more than just a few times where whether it's a fellow employee or a family friend or whatever, where I've made sure that they're aware that Shatterproof exists, and as you just did, go to shatterproof.org. There's a wealth of information out there that is going to further the understanding of how we manage this issue and deal with it and so forth. That's I guess first thought that comes to mind. And somewhat related to this, and again, Gary, this I can tell you, this is the first thought that came to my mind when I guess it was a month or two ago. We were having a conference here in Atlanta, and we had one of the breakout sessions was on the whole question of labor and what's going on in our industry. And I think the latest number for the U.S. was, we got 7.2 million jobs that are open. We just can't find people to fill them, and so forth. And so I was very intrigued to see what these experts in the area of hospitality industry labor employment, how are they trying to effectively manage that issue? The shortage of employees and the scarcity, and invariably, what that does to the cost of labor and so forth. And one of the issues, obviously, has been, finding people that not only ideally have the qualifications to do the job that needs to be filled, but also that they aren't dealing with some other issues that might that impair their ability to succeed at the job that might be available. And one of the things, and this is where I'm trying to go with this. One of the folks made the and it was a head of HR for a pretty good sized hotel management company. Made the comment that they've relaxed and essentially eliminated the requirement for any kind of drug testing for certain positions. Most of them non-guest facing and so forth, that remained open. And so just a way to illustrate how much more challenging that's become. And so I'm thinking about, if we can't get our arms, well, first of all, and Gary, you've probably heard me ask this question or make this comment when I'm speaking to groups and so forth, by show of hands, how many of you think that we have an effective, well-conceived, functioning set of immigration policies here in the U.S.? Right. Of course, everybody laughs and so forth because the answer is clearly no. But you start adding all these things up that speak to the critical issues around labor in the hospitality and leisure industries today. And then you say, well, with respect to addiction, Gary and the team have, as he said, have assembled a lot of this information and insights that absolutely can help people and help address that issue. And Gary, I would expect critically, how do we get folks that have been dealing with this, back into the labor pool and helping them to keep, once again, become a productive member of society.
Yeah. And Mark, that's 100% great. And that's exactly the question, right? And the answer actually is fairly simple. The answer is changing the culture so people can get help. What companies don't realize is most companies have a reasonable handle on the cost of healthcare related to addiction. They can see that. But what they don't see is the cost of healthcare of other issues that aren't related to it, that aren't specifically addiction,
but are affected,
but are caused by addiction. And they clearly also don't see the cost of turnover, the cost of productivity. My son was addicted. I was in the office every day, but I had my door shut and I was on the phone for hours with my son, my wife, the therapist, et cetera, et cetera. I was only working half a day.
Right.
Where are those costs in the numbers? So how do we, as Mark closed his comments, how do we change this?
Right.
It's one simple answer. It's stigma.
Yep.
In a recent poll, half of Americans said that those with this disease, those addicted, it's their fault. They're not trying hard enough.
Right.
And half said it's not their fault. It's a chronic illness. To be honest, that is not that relevant, those statistics, 50-50. What's really relevant is 80% of Americans, 8 out of 10, said, doesn't matter to me whose fault it is. I am not comfortable associating with someone who's addicted as my friend, my coworker, or my neighbor. So think about that. You're addicted and you haven't read the poll or seen the survey, but you feel it. You feel like most people don't want to be around you.
Right.
Work environment, friend environment, neighborhood, etc. So you're addicted and you don't seek treatment. because you
Right.
don't want anybody to know.
Yep.
20% of those addicted in an annual poll, which is done every year, approximately 20% say the key reason they have not sought treatment is they don't want anybody to know, because they
Right.
feel that isolation that will come. I can't tell you, I don't have enough fingers. I don't have enough hands and fingers. None of us do. Of all the people that I have spoken to that said, I haven't sought treatment because I can't run it through my insurance because I don't want anybody to know. And
Right.
I can't afford to go to treatment without the insurance. So I'm not going to treatment.
Right.
I don't want to get fired. I don't want my
Yeah.
boss to find out.
Very real fears.
So if we can reduce that, not if, as we
Mhm.
change that stigma,
Right.
then
Well, let me
that will answer Mark's question.
yeah, well, let me jump in here with something. Robert Mandelbaum is commenting in the room. We all know Robert, and he says that he recently observed another hotel. He placed a 19-year-old in a sober kitchen to start training in the hospitality industry. What a great idea that is, in particular in a hospitality kitchen, the bastion of so-called drug abuse. We've all read back in the day Anthony Bourdain stories, and we know that a lot of folks that I think are more prone to addiction wound up going in that way. So I think it's fantastic that there's such things out there as sober kitchens now. And guys, that seems to me exactly the type of thing that we need in our industry to create a good support system for people that might have been struggling while giving them a career path at the same time.
Absolutely. And the stigma is such a key to this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark knows this because he's involved with Shatterproof, that back in February, I approached McKinsey and Company, the largest consulting firm in the world,
Right.
and said, look, we have a 6-point plan to really improve the treatment system in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
to save lives. And national standard of care, quality measurement system, Just 5 education program, payment reform, getting this into medical schools. But there's one thing that we nor anybody else is really focused on in a big, comprehensive way. It's reducing stigma. It's the 6th point, and arguably the most important point of our plan. And when you look at our nation's response,
Right.
nothing is going to stigma. We're building a quality measurement system. Great. It's good. The government's doubling the money that's going into treatment programs.
Yep.
Great. We're interrupting the supply of fentanyl and heroin into this country. Great. Prescribing practices coming down. Great. But nothing related to stigma. And I said, McKinsey, I can't afford to pay you, but would you consider a pro bono project, put a team of people on this for 4, 5, 6 months, and let's study how did our country change its views on HIV/AIDS?
Right. Right.
How did our country change its views on marriage equality?
Right. Terrific.
10 years ago, you couldn't even join the Boy Scouts if you were gay. Now you can run for president.
Right.
What things worked and what things didn't work? Long story short, McKinsey agreed. We worked together for 6 months. It's a wonderful, wonderful team they put to work with me. And we studied 11 analogous social movements. We studied 100 pieces of published literature, research, what worked, what didn't. We interviewed 48 experts in social change.
Right.
And we came up with it. We then developed a plan to do so for the stigma of addiction. The first key answer is this can be done. This is not rocket science. The research already exists. We pulled lessons learned from the other movements, only the ones we thought were analogous to addiction, the stigma of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be done.
Right.
And I can tell you one of the biggest drivers is educating people in a certain way. And by that, I mean, to change behaviors, we first have to change knowledge and attitudes.
Right.
You start with knowledge. And we talked about Just 5 and some other education programs we have. Just 5 is a great one to start because it's dispelling old myths and giving basic information to people. That's the start. And then you move to changing attitudes. And the way that you change attitudes is educating in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's people with lived experience, educating those without lived experience. And it needs to be done with either in person or a video like we're doing now, or a picture with a couple paragraphs. And the message needs to be given. So by doing that with a face, you're humanizing it. It's
Right.
not them, it's all of us.
Yeah,
And
you're absolutely
one really key point though.
right. Yes,
is,
please.
it needs to also educate people that treatment is effective. People think that the AIDS movement really changed when Magic Johnson came out.
Right.
Certainly it brought awareness to it,
Mm-hmm.
but it really didn't change the way that people viewed it until Magic Johnson came back 2 years later. And he was sweating on the court with 9 other guys.
Right. Right.
That basically gave the message, this is treatable. You can get into a taxi with someone with AIDS. You can live next door with someone with AIDS. You can work next door with someone with AIDS. He's sweating on the court with 9 guys. They're not afraid.
Mm-hmm.
It's treatable. And the good news is addiction is treatable. It's absolutely treatable with the same success rates as diabetes or heart disease or any other chronic illness. That's the message we need to get across. So if people like me, not me because I'm not addicted, but let's say I was,
Right.
and I'm telling a story on a 30-second video. I work at Marriott like all of you, and I've been here for 15 years, and I've been promoted 4 times. I'm now a vice president of the capital markets group
Right.
in the DC office, and I'm married. I have 3 children. I go to church on Sunday mornings. I coach Little League on Tuesday afternoons. And by the
Mm-hmm.
way, I'm addicted to Oxycontin.
Right. Yeah.
And you can live next to me. You can work next to me. You have. There's people on this phone call or watching me now that have. You work with me.
Yeah.
That's the stories that really will create the change.
Right.
And we're building a database of stories right now to be able to give out to companies to use to share with their employee base.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, our friend out there, Marco Roca, is asking how he could get involved, and I want to get to that. And of course, you can go to shatterproof.org to learn more, and just stick around with this live broadcast. We'll give you more explanation on how you can get involved to help too. But I also want to say, Sean Worker out there, who's international CEO from T5 Strategies, and he says, how aware do you think the range of hospitality education institutions are about this serious issue and influencing the graduates to feel comfortable to just say no in those situations? I remember Nancy Reagan telling me to just say no, but that wasn't really helpful when I was out there and I was experimenting and I was hanging out with friends and stuff like that.
I have to be honest, I don't know what level of education's in our hotel schools now as we train professionals. I haven't got to that level of detail yet, so I just don't know the answer to that one. Mark, do you have?
I don't care, but it's a great question, and I think it's clearly a very logical area to begin planting some seeds of awareness. Again, from just the magnitude of the problem to the fact, the reality is, there's something you can do about it. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the problem is that we don't have that inner strength to pull ourselves away. That we feel. You were talking about stigma. I think we feel that other type of stigma. If we're not in there and if we're not doing those things with those people, then we are going to be judged for not participating in that. That's why I like getting back to that idea of the sober kitchen and those ideas. And Gary, you also were mentioning telling those human stories. And I remember going to last year's event where Mark Woodworth will be honored this year as a hospitality hero at Alice on January 28th. And I remember hearing people tell their stories. People that had family members that struggled with this and suffered loss because of this. And it did humanize it. And it made me go, wow, they had that issue. I never knew. That person had to go through that experience. I never knew. And honestly, it did the opposite for me. It didn't create a stigma for me. It made me appreciate those human beings more, to know that they have dealt with this struggle and they have suffered through it. And some have gotten through on the other side in a good way. And those that have suffered a loss, such as you, Gary, have managed to turn it into something to be positive in the net for the future to help society out there.
Absolutely, so absolutely. And I'd like to pick up on one thing that both of you just said.
Yes, sir.
Mark closed with what we can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to put one thing in really flashing neon lights. This is not a rare disease that we need to raise money
Right.
and pour money into scientific research to come up with a vaccine.
Right.
There is a body of knowledge that already exists that we could reduce this whole issue, opioids, alcohol, all drug addiction to drugs and alcohol, by more than half by simply implementing what we already know.
Right.
Research that already exists.
Wow.
If it's treatment, we've already published a national standard of care. We've got enough, 21 insurers signed on to them, the largest health insurers in the country that represent over 200 million lives, have a line now on our national principles of care. We're building a quality measurement system that will then show consumers and payers and state licensors which treatment programs are providing quality and which ones aren't, and give information to providers to learn from each other and do better.
Right.
Doable. We're changing payment models to facilitate quality care. Stigma, Mark was just talking about it, and you were talking about it. This is not, can we change stigma? This is not go do research to figure out how to do it. We've already done the research. It exists.
Right.
We have changed our views on other things. This is blocking and tackling. We're launching a major initiative that we built with McKinsey. We're launching it in the second quarter next year.
Great.
We're going to have easy to implement action items, implementable actions that every employer in the country can do, including hotel companies. Easy things. Just 5, educate your employees with 5 minutes in 6 different lessons. A share your story program where we're going to have a database of stories already built.
Wonderful.
So all that needs to be done is be shared throughout your organization. 3, change your language. Whenever any language is used internally or externally, no more junkie, no more addict, no more clean and dirty. No, it's a human being with a substance use disorder that needs health care like anyone with any chronic illness. It's basic things that are very easy to implement. I just can't stress that enough. This is so doable. It's about mass adoption of simple things. It's not about small adoption of very hard things.
Right. Yeah. And listen, all of you folks out there that are watching and paying attention or listening to this in our audio podcast version that we're releasing at a later date, you already care. You're listening to this. So it's not an issue of having to be convinced. It's learning how you could make more of a difference. That's why Shatterproof is such an important organization. Again, you can find them at shatterproof.org. Now, this year, the event taking place again at Alice on January 28th from 6:15 to 7:30 p.m. is honoring our friend here, Mr. Mark Woodworth of CBRE. So how'd you guys come along to pick this fella right down there to be the hero for this year? He's always been my hero, but I didn't know he was going to be.
Hey, Glenn, thanks for asking the question because I'm still trying to figure that out myself.
You know what? It's a question that doesn't need to be asked, and it's a very easy one to answer.
Yeah.
Since I don't know if the day or the week or the month, but since we started Shatterproof, well, let me back up even broader first. Look, I miss my son every day, every minute. But what has been so inspirational to me and wonderful and a blessing for me is all the people all over the country, like Mark, that have come forward and been part of our movement and part of helping people. And it's just unbelievable. We have 200,000 people and growing every day involved in some fashion, and hundreds of companies now that are getting engaged. Mm-hmm. Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 10 companies getting involved with us.
Wow.
It's so inspiring to see so many people. And then the next sequel is Mark, right? So Mark was literally there the first month or week or since we started Shatterproof. Mark was, how do I help? And Mark is actually not atypical that it was not in his direct family. It wasn't his son or daughter or wife. But Mark knows through extended relationships, whether it's cousins or aunts or friends or workers, that this is an issue. And Mark offered to come help like so many others. He said, how do I help? And Mark's been involved in every single event we've had in Atlanta. He's been involved in every event that we've had in the hotel industry. Right. It was Mark's idea to bring our event to Alice and expose it to the industry more broadly versus city by city by city. I mean, how could we not choose Mark? I mean, such a natural person to join, to be honored for what he's done for this movement.
That's amazing.
I mean, just think about it. Mark's idea to bring this to Alice, because before Mark came up with that idea, we were engaging hotel companies. They were very generous, engaging all in different cities as we did events.
Right.
It was Mark's idea to do it all together at one event. And the amount of people that have engaged because of that idea and Mark's help has saved lives. I mean,
Yeah.
There's no question. I'm not blowing. There are people today that will not be burying their son or daughter because of work that we've done that's been supported by the hotel industry. And it was Mark that's one of the leaders in the hotel industry that's bringing everybody to support us. I mean, think about it. There will be fewer people today burying a child because of people like Mark.
Wow.
And that's a fact. And
well, yeah, Gary,
Mark, that's pretty heady.
Gary, you're very kind too. I would feel remiss if we didn't also bring up the support of Jim Burba very early on, and he understood the need. He was in a position to make it happen at Alice, and so I know you and I think very similarly about Jim, and but for him too, this we wouldn't be doing it this coming January.
A little bit moment of hotel history. Jim Burba founded the conference, which used to be in partnership with UCLA many years ago. Then kind of took it over, I guess, 10, 12 years ago. I don't know. I'm getting older. Everything seems to be a lot longer ago than I thought. Truly great that he gave you that platform. So, Mark, getting involved, and now you're being named a hospitality hero. What a great honor that is. What has been being involved in Shatterproof, at shatterproof.org is where to find them online. How has it made a difference in your life? What has it done for you? Sure, you're helping others, but what has it done for you as a human being? Tell me about that feeling, how helping others actually improves your life too.
Well, I think that and I have a very good friend has to be my personal trainer. Those of you that remember me from prior to 6 years ago, I wasn't quite as svelte, even though I'm not quite svelte today, as I used to be. But Lawton Heidrich, he has a life philosophy that includes it made me aware, and many others that he's worked with. Just the importance of giving back and making a difference and trying to change people's lives. I think most of us are kind of naturally or organically, perhaps. Well, that's now you're talking about my immediate family, whether it's my wife or kids and parents, or for me, I'm in the phase now where we've got grandchildren. Just how critically important that is. But as I mentioned early on, there is only so much time in the day, and so I've always tried to focus on. Where should I be investing my time? And obviously for something like Shatterproof, it's something that not only is it doing a tremendous amount of good for an awful lot of people out there, but that it's being led by somebody who's demonstrated well before Shatterproof came along that he can put together a plan, develop a strategy, identify the tactics that are needed to succeed at that strategy, implement it, and then achieve the goals and objectives. So the opportunity for me to get involved during the early stages of Shatterproof was, it was a special moment for me, and it's something I've been very appreciative of ever since.
That's great. And they are making a difference. And I know Mark has made a big difference. And we want each and every one of you out there to help try to make a difference too. Even if you don't get involved in Shatterproof formally, you can still help folks out there by helping to get rid of the scourge of addiction. If you know somebody that's suffering, share your love with them. Help them find the thing that they need, which is treatment without judgment. And I think that's what we could use a little bit more of in this life as we hit the holiday season. A little bit more empathy, a little bit more love, a little bit more of this understanding that we're all in this together. We're all just fragile human beings. And whether or not you believe in a higher power up above, we all have a power together to make a big change and help those around us that we love, like, and heck, even a few people that we don't like, but we know that need help anyway. That's what being a human being is all about. We are all in it together. So, Gary, how can we find you at Shatterproof? I think we've said Shatterproof.org a lot, but how can we connect with you? And any final thoughts from you? And then we'll get a final thought from Mark as well.
anyone that wants to get engaged in any way or learn about the different ways to engage, the simplest thing is go to our info line. Excuse me, just go to contact and just send an email to our info line and say, please send this to Gary. They'll send me the email, and then I will communicate with that person and understand what they're looking for, and I can connect them with the right person within Shatterproof. We have a volunteer manager that can direct people to the right ways, not the right ways, the ways that they feel comfortable getting involved. If you're a company, same thing. I want to speak to Gary. Companies are getting engaged all across the country. Since we launched this program just 7 weeks ago with JP Morgan Chase,
Right.
the phone's off the hook of companies engaging
Amazing.
with this program. It's
Amazing.
a 6 program. It's 6 lessons, 5 minutes each, all automated on your computer, on your iPhone, on your iPad, any way you want. Employees want to see it, and it will absolutely save lives. People will learn the information that they.
Great. Mark?
Yeah, again, Glenn, thank you for the opportunity for all of us to learn more about Shatterproof, the magnitude of the issue in our industry, in our country, in the world that we live in. Gary, I salute you and the rest of the team, and look forward to continue trying to help in the days and months and years ahead. And hopefully see everybody out in Los Angeles.
Yes, and of course, we've just got to mention it one more time. Come and join us for the annual Shatterproof Hospitality Hero reception at Alice on January 28th from 6:15 to 7:30. We're going to be honoring Mark there, and we'd love to have you attend. So just reach out to us in any way. If you want to reach out to those guys direct, or me too, I'll be able to get your interest in attending the event over to them. So I want to thank you all for being here today. If you haven't downloaded the No Vacancy podcast, find it on Apple, iTunes, Google Play, wherever you find your podcasts. Also check out Checking In with Anthony and Glenn, which I do with Anthony Milcuri of TV's Hotel Impossible, our Hotel Design podcast, our Hotel Deck podcast, and now our LinkedIn Live series. Thanks, guys, for being here. And all of you out there, remember, you're vibrating with love and light. You can do it. You can help others out there. We all love you. Be good. Have a safe and happy holiday. And remember to take care of yourself and other people. And as my favorite band Fish says, take care of your shoes. Whatever you do, take care of your shoes. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you both.
Take care.
Great, we're clear.